Sorry, y'all. Just had to get dialed in there.
That was awesome.
I think we're good today. I'm actually, by the way, at my girlfriend's house in her office, so we should be good. And the real test will be Wednesday for that show because I got to throw a shout out to my man Collins from Spectrum. He was at my house for like an hour before the Super Bowl started, so I felt bad for him. We finally found the culprit, and I think the internet at the house is fixed as well. So shout out to Collins. He actually played football at Orangeburg Wilkinson, played against AJ Green back in the day. So we had some good football talk. So shout out Collins. Even Chris actually stayed on the line. You know how they call you after to leave a review for once because my man went above and beyond to find the issue. So We'll have the real test on Wednesday, but I think we're good. I know we're good today. What's up? It's GC Live. We are, of course, brought to you by our good friends at Mortgage Network and, of course, by Clint Hammond. Give Clint a shout, 803-771-6933, or go to clinthammond.com or mortgagenetwork.com/Clint-Hammond, whether you are a first-time home buyer or whether you are a long-term investor. Clint will get you hooked up with these low mortgage rates that are going around right now. So never a better time to buy a house, and never a better time to be Ryan Succop than yesterday, Chris. Finally gets him a Super Bowl championship. I believe this is his 12th season in the league, so he's stuck around. That'll make you feel old, man. Succop's been in the league for over a decade now. So shout out to Ryan Succop. Tampa Bay, Kobe Smith also on the practice squad there at Tampa. So once again, a Gamecock, couple of Gamecocks taking home Super Bowl rings. And I'm happy for those guys, man. I got to say, though, and we're going to get it obviously into Gamecock sports, but got to talk Super Bowl for a second. What a dud of a game, Chris.
It was so bad. I kept waiting for, they flashed at one point that statistic for Kansas City of all these like playoff comebacks they had. And I'd actually forgotten about the one against the Texans where they were down by like 20 and came back and won by like 24 or whatever it was. I mean, 3 scores on both ends. And I kept waiting for it, and it just didn't happen. Tampa Bay, Todd Bowles, they did a tremendous job defensively. There was nowhere to go with the football most times. They had them really covered up. Tampa's defensive line absolutely ate KC for lunch or dinner, I guess. I mean, it was ridiculous. I mean, Mahomes, it was bad. I mean, it was really bad. So for the most part, sort of, as it turned out, a non-competitive game. So, yeah, definitely a dud, man. I guess your man Collins, even if he had been at your house during the Super Bowl, would not have been that disappointed if he missed it.
Yeah,
he out in my house.
Yeah, I'm with you. I kept sort of I thought maybe in the second half, I was like, okay, they'll be able to make some adjustments. They'll be able to get Mahomes settled in. They'll find some way to give him some time. This was just the classic example of if you can't block him up front, give your quarterback time. Doesn't matter how great he is. Doesn't matter what weapons you have. If you're running for your life, you just don't have a chance. And I don't know if y'all saw, and I'll try to effort it, but I have no idea who posted this. But somebody way smarter than me diagrammed every single drop back by both quarterbacks on Twitter, like with a line basically. And Tom Brady's was like this. It was just like one line after it was like 25 lines that were all just in this little tiny box. Patrick Mahomes was like, looks like your kid when they first learn how to draw, but they can't really draw, and it's just lines all over the place. So insane. Now, I will say this. Some of the throws Mahomes made just to even give a play a chance, like the one that iconic throw now. I mean, I don't know if you can call an incomplete pass iconic, but that photo of him completely perpendicular to the ground, throwing the ball, and he hits the guy in the face mask. Insane. But as statistically as bad as it looks for Mahomes and the Chiefs offense, I mean, you nailed it, dude. It goes down. I mean, they had backups playing on the offensive line. Tampa Bay took complete advantage of it and just showed you. It kind of reminded me, if we're going to remotely put this in a South Carolina, sphere at all here, it reminded me of some of those teams at South Carolina when the defensive line would just take over, and that was the case here. And once it got, I would say, maybe mid fourth quarter or so, like I was with you, I was like, okay, maybe they can get it going at some point. But by about mid fourth quarter, I'm like, this is just not happening. This is over. Tampa Bay was able to run the football and start eating some clock, and that was that. We've had in the last decade, we have had some great Super Bowls along the way, but I do hate when we have all this build up and the game itself just does not live up to the hype, and that was obviously the case yesterday.
Yeah, and I thought probably the expectation going in was just for this to be sort of a quarterback battle, both of them to shine. And Patrick Mahomes didn't really have a chance to do that. He's running for his life. He's already injured with the big toe. Didn't have any receivers open down the field most of the time. His receivers actually, even Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, I mean, they were dropping passes. I mean, that he was delivering. And so it just didn't give him much of a chance. And Tony Romo kept saying, I think it was like in the third quarter, he's like, all right, if they're going to make a run, this is the time to do it. And it was like 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter. All right, they really need to do it now. And they, like you said, never did it. And, dude, the thing I found myself saying during the game at one point was, how bad would this game be if they had like a statue back there playing quarterback for KC? I mean, Patrick Mahomes, it's hard to say he kept them in it because they got, beat pretty soundly. But, I mean, some of the throws, some of the escapability he showed, it's like he had eyes in the back of his head. He was making some of these moves that just didn't even make any sense to buy himself some time. Not only the sort of parallel to the ground one that you mentioned, Wes, but he made the one throw when he rolled out to the left sideline and chucked the ball to, I mean, the absolute back corner of the end zone to Pringle that he almost hauled in, and it would have been a touchdown. And it was just absurd, some of the things that he can do. And that was the storyline to me of just, man, that he didn't get much help, but really, really gutted it out and just didn't have an answer. Tampa Bay dominant defensively. It started up front, like you said, and then obviously they were just really good. They were a well-oiled machine offensively. They could run it. They could throw it. They protected the quarterback. They did everything the right way.
Dude, if he would have completed that throw you're talking about, because Pringle almost made it was a spectacular throw, and then Pringle almost made the catch of the year, diving out of the back side of the end zone.
Yeah.
One-handed, couldn't quite haul it in, but insane level of athleticism on both sides as far as that goes. But yeah, dominance by Tampa Bay's defense, and we won't stay on the Super Bowl too long, but I had the game on, or the pregame on, like in the background all day, and I thought Rombo had a really good interview with Tom Brady, and he was talking about how just the average person, no matter how much football we all watch, it's hard to put into words and to explain what it's like to be a quarterback and process all that information while there's just utter chaos going on to your left and your right and in front of you and behind you and all over the place. And, Brady, I think most of us agree, I won't even say we most agree he is the all-time best, but he's definitely up there. And he asked him, what gets you going? Like, what keeps you going? And his answer wasn't like winning a game, winning a Super Bowl. Brady said he is chasing every single time he hits the field the absolute perfect feeling of delivering a football where it comes off his hand perfectly and is a perfect spiral and goes to the perfect spot. So every single time he drops back, it was like somebody chasing a high almost. Like he's chasing that feeling of the ball coming out perfectly. And, he said the announcers or somebody watching may say, well, man, that was a great throw by Brady. And he may be sitting there saying, that wasn't a perfect throw. I hit him in the left shoulder. I was aiming for the right shoulder. So, the average person throws a ball of any kind, and we're like, oh, it was in their window of being able to catch it. You're like, that was a good throw on my part. Brady is aiming for like a 3-inch window, basically. And he said, even if it's a complete pass, he's sitting there the whole time processing like, I've got to. It was very interesting. I got to get my foot down faster. I've got to get my shoulder turn better. He's constantly tweaking his mechanics throughout a game, aiming for that perfect throw. And he said he only hits that perfect throw maybe 10% of the ones that come out of his hand. So it was very interesting, intriguing to hear him talk so openly, like sort of work through the mind of an all-time great at what he does and how differently he processes whether it was a good play or a bad play based on his standards. Pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, he's just maniacally detailed and like obsessed with like.
Oh yeah, obsessive.
Yeah, very obsessive with all the little processes that whether it's taking care of his body or eating or, all those different things. Not just, hey, what's your goal when you get on the field? It's not just, I'll go up and down and score every time. That's not good enough for him, right? And that's, he wants to hit the perfect throw along the way. And that's what struck me last night, Wes. So I was sitting there thinking, like, this guy, look, the defense was dominant. The run game was really good. The O-line was really good. They got great receivers. Okay, yeah, lots of teams have that. The guy has not dropped off whatsoever. He's 43 years old. There's no reason to sit here and think he'll slip next year. People have been saying that for like 10 years. I mean, I have no idea. They might wheel a 62-year-old Tom Brady out there, hopefully playing for the Panthers or something one day. And, he's chucking touchdowns somehow. I don't know. But the guy, Wes, we're both Panthers fans. 2004, 17 years ago, was the Panthers-Patriots Super Bowl. 2004. And Tom Brady, I mean, it wasn't his rookie year or anything. He'd been playing. And, he leads the Patriots heartbreakingly against our Panthers in that game. That was 17 years ago. And he's back in the Super Bowl. And regardless of what's around him, just the fact that he's still that dominant and is still tossing perfect passes and it's really amazing. So,
well, and I actually love the fire when he and the Honey Badger were getting into it.
Yeah,
I was like, man, this is good. And then, dude, Antoine Winfield with the walk-off peace sign to Tyreek Hill, that was well played. Obviously, Tyreek Hill has dropped the peace sign on quite a few defenders who are slower than him, which is pretty much everybody. So for him to sort of drop that, and the view they have of his face where Winfield is just grinning, like, man, I got this guy. Like, just he'd probably been thinking about that for the last 2 weeks. If I have a chance to drop the peace sign on him, I'm gonna peace out and it was at the perfect time where you could get a penalty and it didn't matter.
Right.
That was pretty good. But all right, let's talk some Gamecocks, y'all. That's what the show is for. It is GC Live, brought to you, of course, by Mortgage Network. And so, Chris, the Montario Hardesty hire has been in place and then official now actually for a while. But because of the issues I've had, we haven't really had an opportunity to dive into it and talk about it and talk about, I would say, staff structure. When you hire a running backs coach, it's important, I think, to have a guy that connects with young people, to have a guy that's going to be a potentially dynamic recruiter. And, I've been asking around it, and Hardesty is still very much on the front end of his career, right? So he's coming in from a place like UNC Charlotte where he hasn't had quite that extensive Power 5 experience yet, but is a guy that played the position at a very high level at the SEC level. Did make it to the NFL, had some injuries that slowed him down, and now is known as sort of one of these young up-and-comers in the coaching community. The words that sort of just kept coming up for me, I talked to a couple of guys, talked to Airden Hayden, who was a Tennessee player back in the day, and actually his son was recruited. His son Chase was recruited a little bit by South Carolina. Bobby Bentley at running backs. I believe he's at Illinois now. Talked to a high school coach in North Carolina. Talked to a high school coach in South Carolina. We saw Marcus Lattimore's tweet about him. I think everybody saw that. But great dude has come up. Positive, infectious attitude is something that's come up. Very just personable guy. And you're projecting a little bit as far as the recruiting because he hasn't had that opportunity yet to do it on this stage. But when I hear that about the personality, I believe that makes for a good fit for that spot. And I think knowing, we're not going to sugarcoat it. Losing a guy like Des Kitchings, you're losing a lot of ties, a lot of relationships. You and I have talked about this off air. Des is sort of one of those guys that just knows everybody, and everybody knows him. So being able to step back into North Carolina, somebody that's obviously been coaching at Charlotte for a couple of years, but is a New Bern, North Carolina native. That's sort of East North Carolina over near Havelock and where Farrah Cooper, Corey Robinson, those guys are from. I think it was important to have someone that comes in and fits all these characteristics that we're talking about here with Montario Hardesty.
Yeah, and I think you made a good point there in terms of the projection, right? That this is a young coach. He actually coached receivers at Charlotte last year, but when you talk about skill position coaching, a lot of times you're going to see guys that, especially when they play the position at a high level, they understand concepts and techniques and all those things. And for Hardesty, it's not like you're asking him to coach something for, and he played running back. He played it at a high level. And so I think you look at like the boxes that a guy can check. Obviously, he played in the SEC at a high level. He played in the NFL. He's got ties to the Carolinas. He's a personable guy. I think all those things that you hit on give you a formula for a good young coach. Now, in terms of, evaluating guys and the actual success or not that's forthcoming, again, it's a projection type of thing. But I think you look at all those different things that he brings to the table. Shane Beamer even mentioning that, hey, Montario knows what our guys are going through because he's had several different coaches during his career, and obviously Kevin Harris and Marshawn Lloyd, all these guys, they're in that position as well. So to have them understand that, to have a guy with SEC background who knows that sort of unique pressure and challenges, I think was big. And then again, like you said, West Carolina's native, going to bring some ties there. I think he'll be a good recruiter for the Gamecocks just because of his personality and his background. Really intriguing fit, I think, and a good move to hire him to the staff. Losing Kitchings, obviously, really tough. I mean, we've covered that for a lot of reasons. But again, it's about when you have a defection, who do you bring in? Do you bring in a quality replacement? And I do think this is a quality replacement.
Yeah, and I think, Chris, first of all, he inherits – I think for a young coach like he is, like we said, it's going to be helpful that he's not being brought into a position group that's going to need to be flipped instantly. We've talked about it. Justin Stepp coming in, and Stepp has proved he can build up a position group with the best. He's going to have to do that at South Carolina. That's a position group that's going to either, via development or recruiting, but really a combination of both, you would say. That position group's going to have to get better, and Stepp has been brought in to do that. I think Hardesty comes in, you say, okay, you got Kevin Harris, you got Marshawn Lloyd, you got Rashad Amos still there as well. You got Juju McDowell, who is someone that I've been told Hardesty was familiar with and was high on out of high school as well. So you're really sort of coming in. You can hit the ground running, but there's not just this immense pressure to try and turn that position around. And I think Des Kitchings had built a foundation with maybe 5, 6 guys who are running backs in this 2022 class where he already had South Carolina in a decent spot. Not that South Carolina was like the complete favorite, top team for all 5 or 6 of these guys, but that South Carolina was firmly in the conversation. And the approach was, okay, if South Carolina is very much in it for 5 or 6 of these guys, you feel good about landing, 1 or 2 of them, depending on what your numbers end up being. So there is a bit of a foundation, I think, already established both in the room already, plus, you go out and you have some guys in the Southeast that are interested in your program. Hardesty, I imagine, will sell his game, what he did at the SEC level and the sort of brief but NFL experience. Not everybody can claim that either. So he'll sell those things and sort of go from there. I do think before we move on to something else, man, worth mentioning that we've heard now from multiple places, and it's been reported, I believe, by Football Scoop, is that Tennessee was heavily involved here, and Tennessee very interested in getting him on their staff, which says something about his reputation right now in the coaching community as an up-and-comer, as a fast-rising type young guy, and very big for South Carolina to be able to come in and land him versus him going to Tennessee instead.
Yeah, I mean, it's his alma mater, so obviously that's something really interesting. And we've heard some different things there about the dynamics of that situation. But obviously Tennessee, they got some questions right now, and so indeed a nice win for South Carolina to be able to be a more appealing situation, I think, for Montario Hardesty to walk into. And when you look at the program, yeah, the wins lately have not come, but the stability of the program in terms of not having, say, NCAA cloud hanging over, or a coach who maybe you don't know as well, or you're not as sure about, and having some other ties. I mean, obviously, Montario Hardesty worked for Will Healy at Charlotte. Will Healy knows Marcus Satterfield very well. They've worked together in the past, and so there's some familiarity and some ties there. And then obviously with South Carolina, they've got a really, really talented running back room as well. So, and it's in the Carolinas. So it's not his alma mater, but it's in the Carolinas. It's in the SEC. So a good fit for both sides. And like you said, Wes, a quality addition for South Carolina, particularly in light of some of the other interests that he was apparently picking up.
No doubt, man. By the way, I just saw your tweet.
We lost Wes. I think the irony here is fantastic. Wes.
Just kidding.
That was funny. I was just talking about how ironic that was. You were just about to talk about my tweet about your internet.
Yes, and we switched sides here, which I'm sure they're going to love us for that. Hold on. Hang tight real quick. We're going to flip. There we go. It's funny how life works. That one was completely on me. Clicking around, closing myself out. But I just saw Chris's tweet about about me searching for my internet signal with that now viral meme of the weekend during the Super Bowl halftime in the mirror. Dude, I got dizzy. I don't know. Am I just old or was that everybody? I got dizzy watching the weekend in this was that like a county fair style like
a maze,
mirror room,
house mirror. Yeah.
What, dude? So halftime show. Somebody posted on our board. That's the best halftime show of all time, and I don't know if they were trolling or it wasn't the best. It wasn't the worst. To me, it was sort of blah. I felt like the sound mixing of it was awful. Like his voice was coming through very just sort of muted almost. Like it didn't feel like a real performance. It felt sort of like, I don't know, like you were listening on the radio or something. So
yeah, I agree with you. That's what I thought at the beginning, because we were sitting there talking about, the Weeknd apparently spent $7 million of his own money for the production and things of that nature. And obviously, like a lot of the visual stuff, you're like, yeah, I can see how this costs a lot. But like when he came on, when he was first singing, I was like, I can't, it was sort of bad sound mixing. And so I don't know, what the deal was with that. But I don't know, man. There were a lot of strong opinions. It was funny getting on social media afterward because there was that mix of that was absolutely horrific, that was the worst ever, or oh man, that was so good, it was fantastic. I was somewhere in the middle. I was fine with it. I didn't think it was great. Like for instance, I thought musically, like Bruno Mars. Remember when he did it? What was that? A few Super Bowls ago. I thought that was superior. But I'm down with The Weeknd. We'll have to get Colin Taylor on to get his take. I
Yeah,
think he likes The Weeknd, but you never know because he's so random with things he likes and doesn't like.
Yeah, he has some interesting food and musical opinions. But yeah, I mean, here's the thing, dude. If you're going to do the Super Bowl halftime, you got to be prepared. You're going to be critiqued on every single thing you do.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, man. I know the guy's a millionaire, very successful, and it all sort of comes with the territory, but couldn't be me, man. Like you got to have some thick skin to be a celebrity in that position because down to what shoes you're wearing and just people are going to and God forbid you slip or like make a mistake or do something stupid. People, it's going to be on Twitter like that. You're going to get ripped. Lots of people saying Prince was the best performance. That was a great performance in the rain as well. All right, let's talk a bit about. Let's go back to the recruiting class and then sort of bring it forward. Maybe, and I'll give you a heads up here, Chris. Maybe be thinking about maybe you're an instant impact guy or two, and maybe your most underrated guy or two. We'll go to that, but let's take it forward. So right now, South Carolina, and there's an article on Gamecock Central right now that Colin posted with quotes from Beamer last week, where he's talking about the flexibility in having one more. You have one more spot left. So we've been tracking this entire time. It's been, hey, there's 11 spots left. Hey, there's 3 spots left. One spot left for 2021 to officially count towards 2021 before you even have to get into talking about, well, can a guy come in a little bit later? Can he help this year but count forward, et cetera, et cetera. One spot left. Now that you've seen the class, Chris, you've seen the transfers, where does your head go? Let's say perfect world, not necessarily a prospect specifically because we don't know who's going to be available after the spring. But if you could fill that one scholarship with the perfect skill set, we'll say, at a particular position, what spot do you feel like you want to bolster with that one spot? And I'll answer real quick. Jay said, are we keeping our last scholarship for Charleston Rambo? He has committed to Miami. So no, although I got to say, Jay, he would have been a great pickup. But Chris, where's your head at on that one?
So trying to factor in what's on the roster and even sort of what's forthcoming, from this recruiting class, whether it's transfers that are on campus or guys getting in later. And so the 2 spots I thought of, Wes, were the 2 biggest need spots for me. So receiver and DB, right? To me, they have the most questions. They're in the need. They have the most need for an immediate impact guy. So, but you're trying to get me to narrow it down to one. I probably still go receiver, and that's even with Amarian Brown transferring in, EJ Jenkins transferring in, both those guys on campus. I think both those guys are going to help a good bit. Now, how good they'll both be, I don't know, but I think right now, if we're sitting here projecting, which is all it is, probably they're both playing a lot. Maybe even starting one or both of them. I mean, we just don't know at this point, but I think that's possible. I would still go receiver. Because you said perfect world situation, right? So perfect world, that means there's some just stud wide receiver for proven guy for whatever reason. He's in the portal. You can bring him in, plug him in. That would be my personal pick.
I got you. And see, I'm down to those final 2 as well. I will say, so right now, somebody brought this up to me a couple of weeks ago. If you're South Carolina, and let's just talk about the numbers, class of 2021, right now, you have Sam Reynolds, you have Omega Blake, you have E.J. Jenkins, you have Amarian Brown, and technically you have Jalen Brooks. So 5 wide receivers counting towards your 2021 class. And right now you've used 24 scholarships. So 5 of your 24 are already being spent on that one position group. Then if we add another one, you're talking about 6 for that 24 spots. Yep. So my very quick math tells me that 1/4 of your spots will be used on one position group. So to me, it's probably going to depend on how good of an actual player they are. All things being equal, if you could tell me South Carolina could go land an absolute lockdown cornerback, like the type guy that is an immediate impact, that no-brainer starts and sort of just lessens the pressure on some of these other newcomers that are in the secondary, I would probably take that guy in the perfect world. If the DB and the receiver were the exact same level of player, I'm going to edge out just a little bit towards DB. Now, if let's say the DB is just solid, but the wide receiver is a true number one receiver, like that guy that changes the complexion of your offense, then it's a no-brainer for me. I'm going wide receiver. I'm taking the guy, that can come in and make a true impact. But both of those, perfect world, if you told me they could have a lockdown corner or an impact wide receiver, either one of those things would be a huge addition to this football team.
It would. And so that was my hesitation on receivers. Man, from a numbers standpoint, not only in the recruiting class, Wes, but it's not like there's only 5 receivers on this roster. Like, even, so you're really getting into a big time situation where going, man, you're using a lot of numbers. The only saving grace from that I thought of is, hey, maybe you take a look at moving Omega Blake to defense, right? Maybe. Mm-hmm. And that's not in the plans that we know of right now. I've always thought that that's a possibility. So just from a speculation standpoint, you could do that if you felt like you needed more numbers help. Amarian Brown and E.J. Jenkins are not, freshmen, right? So you're bringing them in, and it's a little bit different. It's not like you're bringing in 6 freshmen. Your transfer guy would presumably not be a true freshman. So that was the only thing I thought of. I just thought, corner is and safety. I mean, wherever you can get a guy at DB, huge need. I just thought because receiver was such a need position last year and is such a question mark this year, just edged out just a little bit to me.
And I see a lot of people saying safety, which I get. I understand completely. But for me, I'm always at DB, I'm always leaning cornerback. I'm always leaning coverage over safety. And I think there's a little bit of maybe lingering feelings about the safety spot that I think very important to point out, Chris, that the safeties in Will Muschamp's defense, we've talked about this before, were asked to do a ton. Some of the inconsistencies in safety play were because those guys mentally were asked to have such a big role, to have so much thinking, to have so much processing within any given play. I imagine just because this is the first time I've heard of a defense being this complicated for safeties, by default, I would think Clayton White's is going to be a little bit more simple for safeties. I generally think, now granted, if you can get studs across the board, you want studs across the board. But I think you have a better chance of sort of having a guy just not as athletically talented, but is smart, knows how to play the game, and can just not get you beat, you have a better chance of that guy being able to help at safety. Whereas corner, there are certain physical traits that you almost just have to be able to play that position. So positional value, much stronger if you have a lockdown corner than even your best safety, in my opinion. Now, perfect world, you'd rather have the lockdown corner than you'd rather have the safety that'll knock your head off. And, but this is not an Alabama defense. This is not, you're trying to build it to where it's ultimately at, a point where you have studs at every spot. But right now we're talking about that one scholarship and the best way to spend it. And we'll see it, Chris. It'll be interesting to see what new guys pop up after spring practice.
Yeah. It will be. It will definitely be very interesting to see. And Wes, I don't know. I don't think South Carolina's going to force the issue either. It's not just like they're going to peruse the portal and say, "All right, guys," if that sort of no-brainer. Which there's two sides to that story, right? It has to be a guy that you can get, and it has to be a guy that you want out of the portal, because for some of these highly coveted portal guys, sometimes they have an idea of the direction that they would like to go once they enter the portal, or sometimes if they do enter the portal totally open, there's going to be heavy competition. It's recruiting all over again. And so there's two sides to that. But I don't think South Carolina is going to look around and get to some critical point and say, all right, guys, let's just sort of pick the best guy out of the portal just to bring in another guy. Is there a decent chance they use the spot? Sure. But I think it has to be in the right situation, because there's still, there's scholarship considerations all over the place. And you want to add a guy that's going to fit in and can help you. So I'll be interested in it. I think the odds are, Wes, that it would be one of those two spots if they do choose to use one. So we'll see where it goes from here.
Yeah, and I think unless, the only other scenario that it could be another spot would be if some, and I can't even think of anybody that would fit this, but if there's just some connection to a guy at another spot that's just like a no-brainer player, that's just such an impact guy, and maybe is from the area, or maybe has a connection to one of the new coaches, just something where just like, oh, sort of that epiphany, like, oh, that guy knows him from back then. And this guy's too, like a stud left tackle or something. That's not a top of the line need, but you could always use a stud left tackle. That's the only way I would really see it being another spot. But as far as efficiency and best use of that, I think you're right, man. It's got to be a DB. It's got to be a wide receiver. And I don't even know the rule anymore, because it's been so long since South Carolina has been in this situation. If they don't spend it, Chris, which I assume they're going to find a transfer to spend it on. But if they just stayed at 24, can you still count back next year? I know South Carolina's been over for so long. I don't even know what the rules are now, but would they be able to count an initial for 2022 early enrollee back to 2021 if it came to that?
That would be the case. Now they're looking at making some changes to, the 25 initial counters to try to lock it in a little bit more as far as like a maximum. We don't know quite yet what those are, what those will be. So that could change. There could be some new guidance on that, but that has been, that was a question a lot this year of, hey, in the 21 class, can South Carolina count any guys back to 20? The answer was no, because they counted some guys in the 20 class forward to 21, which means they had no room. So, in theory you can, but we don't know yet if there'll be any changes, to how things operate going forward from a numbers standpoint.
All right, a couple of questions here. First of all, Nathan says we need a guy or a number of guys to step up and really be a vocal leader and motivator this offseason. Wes and Chris, who do you think that could be? Good question, Nathan. I think you lose a guy like that in Ernest Jones. And as good as Ernest was on the field, tackling machine, we all see that. He was equally, or if not even better, as sort of that vocal dude that everybody sort of follows. And you had TJ Brunson before that. and then Ernest sort of took on that role. TJ may be a little more of a lead by example type guy, but still, they're going to miss that, Chris. I mean, it is, we've talked about it. Sherrod Green's going to have a lot on his plate this year. Is he really known as being that vocal, talking type guy? I would say no. Is there a returning guy in the defensive backfield that's really that vocal type leader? Not that it immediately comes to mind. I look maybe on the defensive front, a Jabari Ellis, a guy who we've seen grow into his role as more of a leader. Maybe a JJ Enigbare, maybe some of these older guys that are on the defensive front on that side. I will tell you maybe a dark horse for this role, and ultimately who I believe will be a leader, but it's hard to do this as a freshman, would be Debo Williams, because this kid just has the it factor about him, works hard. And when I say work hard, I don't mean into just, oh, that guy works hard. He's like one of those above and beyond type of workers that's already been apparent in his time on campus. And, I think when you look at Debo, this is a kid, just from talking to him a couple times, he's a really good communicator, and that's important as far as leadership. On the other side, Chris, I think there's several guys on this offensive side that are either already leaders or are working their way into being sort of leaders, as far as maybe replacing some leaders who have moved on.
Yeah, I think, in some form, Wes, they were missing leadership last season, even with some of the older guys on the roster. I think that's something we sort of picked up on, that an area that South Carolina could do better in. And I think, when I think back to like the Steve Spurrier era, the culture changed there when they brought in some of the younger players, right, who were very talented, but were also, once they arrived, were some of the best workers on the team, the tone setters, and that helped get everybody else in line. And I think you could, and this has to be the hope for South Carolina, you could see some of those younger guys, even guys like you said, Debo Williams. I mean, he's a freshman, just got to South Carolina, but has already set the tone. But some guys that are coming back, a Luke Doty, obviously, has already been lauded for his leadership abilities. I think he'll continue growing there. Marshawn Lloyd could, be that type of guy. There's some, veteran presences on offense, whether it's Nick Muse or some of the offensive linemen that are upperclassmen, could certainly help out in that regard. Kevin Harris he's probably going to be more of a quiet guy, but he's a great worker, great kid. So I do think the interesting thing is, Wes, I would agree with you in that there's probably a few more proven commodities on offense in terms of leadership right now.
Our buddy Gamecock Russ also mentioned Nick Muse. That's another guy there that I think is developed into a bit of a leader. And let's talk a little bit more recruiting as far as this staff goes, and sort of, not the staff, but the class. And maybe I don't think we have much time to get into 2022, but that's something we can maybe get into coming up, maybe on Wednesday's show. There's a question about, the Spring Valley quarterback. And yes, DeQuandre Smith did get an offer from South Carolina. Let's see who asked that. Nathan. But an offer that's more as a defensive back, safety. I believe Michigan has offered him possibly in that role as well. But Chris, this is someone we've heard defensive staff is very high on, that South Carolina likes a lot. I know you talked to him. There's always going to be that question when you have a high school quarterback. How open are they to changing positions? And then there's always going to be that question of what schools are sort of willing to let a guy maybe play quarterback, and what schools are saying, hey, this guy's a great athlete, we'd love to have him, play receiver or play DB or something like that. So what's been your early read on DQ Smith there at Spring Valley? Obviously, South Carolina very high on him as an athlete.
Yeah, and there is a thought that the discussions, from my understanding, sort of centered around the potential play in safety. And it's something that he's open to, DQ Smith. But from what he told me right now, obviously with the ways to go, we'll have to see how the options shake out, et cetera. Right now, his preference is to play quarterback, just because he said he really likes it. He's worked extremely hard at it. And so we'll have to see, Wes. I mean, it could happen to where he has more and more options to play quarterback, and that ends up being a better fit. But he's very familiar with the South Carolina program. He spoke with several members of the staff, Clayton White, Eric Henry, who's going to handle recruiting the Midlands for South Carolina, which makes a lot of sense. But it's hard to see. It's hard to, sort of project where this one may go, which direction it may take. We know he likes to play quarterback. We know that more schools right now seem to project him to the defensive side of the ball, which he also has experience doing that as well.
All right, so 2021 class, Chris, let's start with your instant impact. Can be a guy in the actual, I guess I don't know how we're going to say it, the actual class, the counted class, or a transfer. Probably, I would imagine, going in the direction of transfer in this case. But who is your top instant impact guy for South Carolina?
For me, it came down to one of the receivers in E.J. Jenkins or Amarian Brown. I went with Brown. Amarian Brown, the Georgia Tech transfer, slightly edged out right now just because I think he's going to bring that speed factor. I think when you're looking at guys, trying to figure out ways to manufacture getting guys with speed and his type of electric playmaking ability, the ball in his hands, I think that one makes sense. He's a guy who can take the top off of the defense. You can maybe use him in jet sweeps, things like that. So that's why I picked Brown. I think he'll give a dose of athleticism to this wide receiver room right off the bat.
Yeah, and I'm gonna give another guy because Brown was gonna be mine as well. And I think that the way I look at these two guys, Chris, if and by the way, I don't know if y'all watched the little videos they had with the new guys who are already on campus. Brown just sounded like a seasoned adult talking. Like he didn't sound – I mean, obviously he's been in college for a couple years now, but definitely didn't sound like a high school kid and really sounded like a professional talking on there. E.J. Jenkins, hilarious, like low-key hilarious. The guy, his favorite food, I've never heard this before. His favorite food is cream of wheat. I obviously know, I guess some people eat it because it's still sold. I've never in my life heard someone say it's their favorite food. But E.J. Jenkins, and by the way, what do we keep hearing about him, Chris? We keep hearing, man, this guy's massive. Just him talking on screen, you can just tell, like, this is a big dude. So the way I sort of tried to, I guess, qualify how I think they'll make an impact, for me, Chris, Brown is the more sure thing. Like, I'm like, if I was having to take a bet, like we're talking about right now, who would definitely impact this team next year? Brown, I feel like there's like a 95% chance he's the starter in the slot. And I think he'll be in that Shi Smith type role. Whereas Jenkins, it's more the floor is a little bit lower. Like if you told me it's taken him a little bit more time to find his place, to find his role, that would make sense to me. But if you also told me that he came in and just took over and was like the number one guy and his athleticism and size just took over, I would believe that as well. I feel like Brown's like the more sure bet, but Jenkins is the one that could just blow up, basically. And I would be most curious to see I think we know exactly how they would use Brown. Jenkins, is this guy just a true wide receiver? You just line him up outside every time and say, go make plays? Or after he spends another, 6 months in this college or this FBS strength program, does he start adding more and more weight? And you start saying, man, this guy's more of like a like a guy you want to use like a Kyle Pitts, just move him around, and he's almost like a hybrid tight end type guy. To me, those will be some fun questions to see answered.
Yeah, and that he does have a lot of intrigue behind him because of that size. I mean, you don't see 6'7", 6'8" receivers out there a lot that have the type of movement ability that he does, and the early returns just in terms of his attitude and the type of worker that he is at South Carolina have definitely been good. But that's why I mean I totally agree with you. I think Brown's a little bit more of a sure thing, and not to say, look, by saying that, we don't need those people that say when we think a guy could be a good player, that doesn't mean we're saying he'll be a first round pick or whatever it may be. But Brown he's done it at a little bit of a higher level. He had a really, really good freshman year at Georgia Tech. He's got speed. He sort of fits, some of what South Carolina is going to be missing with Shi Smith. Now, obviously, they need guys all over in a variety of roles, outside slot, wherever it may be. But I think Brown's athleticism and his speed going to give him a little bit more of a chance to make a quicker impact. But it would not surprise me at all if EJ Jenkins is, a guy that steps up by the end of the year or earlier.
Yeah. So again, Brown was going to be my pick. Instant impact. And see, I really like Debo Williams as well, but I don't know what the fair expectations are for him to play right away. Because he is a veteran, he is a transfer, but he's not a veteran. He hasn't played college ball. So I think we do have to remember he is still a freshman. Yep. So I don't think I can put him as my instant impact. Again, so I'll say Brown as well, but the other sort of maybe underrated but could make an impact guy would maybe be if you go to the other side, like a Jordan Strachan. I think a pass rush guy, even if it's more of like a pass rush specialist type role early on, that's something South Carolina could still use. And, so, especially third down passing situations, this guy is going to find a way to be on the field, I think. So that's maybe my asterisk there. I'll throw him in as well. All right, so most underrated guy in the class, Chris, who is yours?
This was actually an easy pick for me, believe it or not. It's actually the lowest ranked guy in the class, and that is Isaiah Norris, junior college defensive back from my alma mater, T.L. Hanna. That's not why I picked him, but attended Georgia military, spent a season at New Mexico military before that. And I was actually, the reason this was an easy pick for me, Wes, I was going back over some older material today, and came across a talk that I had with Rob Manchester, who was defensive coordinator at Georgia military. So obviously that school's produced a ton of talent, man. They've gone on to the SEC, other leagues, the NFL. This guy knows good players when he's seen them, and he raved about Isaiah Norris and how good he was. Said the only thing is he's, not a super big kid, right, in terms of size or frame, but he raved about him. He said he's really good. He works extremely hard. He wants to knock your head off when he hits you. He can cover. He also went back to what Jeff Herron, the former head coach at T.L. Hanna, who's been, super successful, turned around Hanna, was at Camden County, was at Prince Avenue Christian, I think it was before that, won state championships, both of those schools in Georgia. And Jeff Herron said that Isaiah was one of the best guys he'd had ever. And so those to me, were impactful. And so I think Isaiah could potentially make an impact on the team this year, but I just look at his rating, as a lower, a 2-star guy, and think that he'll have a really good chance to outplay that.
All right, what direction am I going here? I'm gonna give 2 guys again. I don't care. Because I want to mention. I want to mention Debo as one of them. So I am very high on Debo. And God, I think you look at the film and you're just like, how is this guy? Like, what am I missing? How was he not more highly recruited? So I'll say I'll give 1 for the transfers and 1 for the actual signees. How about that? So Debo Williams, that's my easy answer for the transfers. For high school guys, for me, it kind of came down to Nick Barrett or Juju McDowell. I go back to some things we heard maybe a few months ago as far as the guys they definitely did not, want to lose from this class, and some guys that the old staff was incredibly high on. Nick Barrett is someone that fits a mold that we don't really see South Carolina have much of right now at defensive tackle, in that he is a bigger kid, can play some true, like, sort of one technique type stuff at defensive tackle. But for me, Juju McDowell is the guy who comes into a position group that doesn't necessarily have a huge need, but provides a little different skill set. And I think McDowell can help on special teams, which, is something where there is no sort of true proven kickoff returner on this roster right now. So I look at McDowell, explosive kid, touchdown machine. Des Kitchings was very high on him, as I said. Hardesty, high on him as well, I believe, from what I've heard. So I think he's a guy that fits the mold. And maybe, Beamer even said during the first signing day, he said, expect McDowell to have a chance to play early. So that sort of stood out to me about him.
Yeah, I like McDowell a lot too, man. I mean, just played for a really good Lee County team, but like you said, touchdown machine, and can do a variety of things with the ball in his hands. Can catch the ball out of the backfield. You can, do some things with him in space. He can run the football between the tackles because he's built powerfully. Special teams, whether it's actually having the ball in his hands or going down and being a gunner, Wes, a guy that can go play on special teams. I think he has the athleticism and the mentality to do that. This is a tough kid. He's got a defensive background. So I think there's a lot to like about McDowell as well, and certainly would not be surprised if he sort of outplayed that ranking. He was a guy that Des Kitchings liked a lot. I think that was sort of in his wheelhouse. Des Kitchings is one of his sort of, one of his guys that he's plucked over the years that's sort of been a little bit underrated and has gone on to be a really good player.
Lake Morris points out that your boy Norris was also a machine in the return game at TL Hanna. So there'll be some options there, and I believe there will be some competition because some of those spots are completely wide open on special teams. So, all right, we're pushing up against the hour mark, so I think that's going to do it for today. Y'all hit us up on Twitter. He is GC Chris Clark. I'm Wes Mitchell GC, and let us know who you want to see as guests, because obviously we're actually into the off season now, and we're going to need some guests for sure to sort of push us across. So appreciate y'all joining. Shout out to the degenerates there on the chat. Shout out to our Gamecock Central subscribers, readers, watchers, listeners, and everybody. For Chris Clark, I am Wes Mitchell. We'll see you on Wednesday.